Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report Summer Solutions, where we focus on the solutions, not so much the problems. Stacy.
Right. We are joined by Jeff Booth, author of The Price of Tomorrow. Jeff, welcome to Summer Solutions. And I want to tell you that we've been discussing over the past few weeks Michael Burry, the well-known hedge fund manager, star, the subject of the film The Big Short. He recently warned of hyperinflation and is shorting U.S. Treasuries. Stan Druckenmiller, legendary hedge fund manager as well, is warning of very high inflation and is shorting the U.S. dollar. Janet Yellen, however, says there will be no hyperinflation, and you kind of agree with Yellen, probably not for the same reason, but tell us what your position is in terms of you see deflation.
The primary thing happening in the world today is an inflationary monetary policy running into technology that's increasingly deflationary. So that imagine what would happen in that as governments push up printing presses and drive inflation more and more and more. What would a business driving their own a rational business do? Wouldn't they try to remove labor faster with technology? So what you're finding is the policy is designed. You have two forces colliding into each other, and each one is moving faster and faster in opposing directions. I am not saying that someday we don't get to hyperinflation, but by stepping into that trap with central bankers, and what will happen is they will be more right because technology will drive out labor faster and remove cost faster, and it'll make it look like they have more room. When they do that, it will give them, essentially you're concentrating more power in the state. So I try to stay away from that debate in the way that people are talking about the debate, because I'm looking at the structural issues that are happening to society. And there's no way to stop those structural issues from a system that requires inflation.
So let's look at the chips market for a second, microchips. So certainly they've been deflating in price through technological advancements for 20, 30 years. And that's a main component of this technological wave. It's always about storage, processing, and transmission, right? Those are the three main components of this technological age we live in. Now, what's happening is the chips are running out of supply. So the supply is not happening due to a lot of reasons, primarily because the world's economy are breaking down due to malinvestments, due to money printing, and that's causing inflation. So chip prices, they're not around, you can't buy them. So it's a supply, they're out of chips, you can't get chips. So General Motors and they're not making cars. They're saying we can't make the cars, and the price of those cars, the ones that are available for even used cars, are above new cars. So the car market's in backwardation, if you will. So that's inflation brought on by money printing, malinvestments, and chip shortage. So the question is that I see the scenario of that asymptotic curve of prices going to zero for all things technology, which is deflationary. But it seems to have hit a brick wall here, because all of that malinvestment that comes with all the money printing has now caused logistical breakdowns and real inflation. So how do you square the circle?
So that is all correct. And it's actually way more correct than I think. So you're looking at one example, but the same thing could be said for housing. So same thing could be said for oil. Same thing could be said for every other asset on the planet today. And so what happens is a byproduct of what you just said. So those prices go up. There becomes a shortage in the market. Prices go up higher. What would happen? What would the free market do? Now you can make money on those chips. So more chips will come online as a result, bringing prices back down. So you get these transitory effects of short-term supply disruptions caused by the same thing, caused by the money printing, that makes it look like, oh wow, we're still living in that same world, which causes it to go faster through on the other side of it. And again, reinforcing the other point, concentrating more power in government by doing it. So causing prices to go up, and then going to the governments to say, save us from the prices going up.
Price of tech keeps crashing to zero. We've got decades of deflation. And the fact, however, is that the cost of making money is even less than zero. As a matter of fact, it's negative. You've got negative interest rates now. So even though the price of tech is approaching zero, it's not zero. Whereas the price of printing money is in fact zero, it's less than zero. And that's not going to stop. They've got themselves into a trap right now where no rational interest rate policy is going to come back ever again. They're in a situation where they will simply print their way until we have essentially a massive global failure, as we saw in 2008, but much, much worse. So I guess the question is, yeah, I mean, tech's cheap, but price of money is zero. How do you beat that?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. If you have abundance in money, you have scarcity everywhere else. Or if you have scarcity in money, you'll have abundance everywhere else. That is the world. That's the transition of a world we're moving into. But we've never been there before. This transition to digital is way more powerful than most people know. It's not just in the microprocessors and everything else. The AI, robotics on top of that create labor savings, and those labor savings create deflationary pressures. And governments could fight that all they want. You're right, what they're doing, but the byproduct of fighting it is holding prices high so that more people can't pay for those prices. Food prices up, oil prices up, more people can't pay for their gas, more people can't. And so then they go to the exact same government who created the problem in the first place and say, save us, we need money to live, and we don't understand that you caused the problem in the first place. So you have a system trying to stop the system. The only thing I don't agree with, or potentially don't agree with what you're saying, Max, is this could go on for a long time, but the only way it could go on, there's two paths: centralize all government with AI and robotics, and have every decision in the state. And it could go on for a long time, and that is the path we're on. More and more government spending, more and more, and the population will reach for those same people that say, "Save us from the problem you said," and the population would likely do that. The second thing is war and reset, which we've seen through history, and the third is Bitcoin, a path to humanity's abundance through a new currency regime that is not able to be manipulated.
All right, let's talk about Bitcoin for a second, because now we have a real life example of a country adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. That would be El Salvador. What I noticed is immediately became a circular economy. People are earning and spending in Bitcoin. People are now opting out of a lot of the problems that come from a central bank printing lots of money. And I immediately noticed a few things. One, the Bitcoin ATM machines are now moving to be produced in El Salvador. So that's hard manufacturing. Those are manufacturing jobs. Those are going to be better paying jobs in El Salvador than they've had in quite some time. Two, property prices are going up, which would speak to a certain GDP growth happening in the country. And so is that what we can look forward to on a more global basis if we drop this fiat money standard and apply a Bitcoin standard? And then your thesis about deflation becomes more of a net positive, I would say, in terms of the quality of life, right? Because we don't mind deflation in the terms of quality of life. You know, the fact is that over the years, things that used to cost a lot of money are cheaper now. You know, we don't have to buy a horse and feed a horse and stable a horse and breed horses. We can buy a car and it lasts for 20 years. It runs on cheap gas. I mean, that's a productivity gain that everyone benefited from through the deflation in transportation costs. So that's a positive deflationary loop. Now, in El Salvador, do we see these forces coming together and showing a future where what you've been writing about and talking about in Bitcoin are blended into something that we could call a model of the future?
The free market has finally come for money, and that's what Bitcoin is. And as a byproduct of that, you're not going to have misinformation in money, and then misinformation everywhere else in your economies. Because that's really what's happening. When you manipulate money, you create misinformation in money. Money is just an abstract concept. And when you have misinformation there as a byproduct, you have misinformation everywhere else. Bitcoin solves that. And what you're seeing in El Salvador is you're seeing the free market race to adopt it. And it makes sense. I'd ask you this, and this is really important, perhaps for a lot of your listeners. How can it that every individual actor, you, me, everyone else, make decisions where our money is worth more? We look for savings. We look for value. How is it in an economy where we're looking for value personally? How can we all believe that we need to live in an economy where our money is worth less each year? It seems only central bankers could believe that. With every rational actor trying to decide to make value more, right? To drive more value. Why do you use Google? Why do you use Amazon? Why do you use everything else? We could still dig holes with spoons. We don't, because we save our time and money, and we're making it more efficient all the time. That should be deflationary. And when you allow a currency to be deflationary, to allow that deflation, you get broad abundance to society. If you do not, you concentrate all power. It's as simple as that.
Well, we've been talking about that Cantillon effect, and we definitely see it in the past year with all the money printing, both from the Fed and from the Treasury. We saw the mainstream media kind of focuses on, the household wealth of the bottom 50% increased by 10,000. But Jeff Bezos' wealth went up 88 billion. Elon Musk went up even more. Like the top 1% just ran away. And that's destabilizing for any network, any system. Any system's going to collapse under that sort of disequilibrium. So, you had tweeted, in my opinion, it is structurally impossible to transition the monetary system today without concentrating all power in the hands of very few and or destroying our planet. That's the point that we're at right now with the current system.
Stacy, that's a really good point. People measure a system from their system. It's really hard to step out of a system and measure the system you live in from another system. And so even when you're talking about this inflation, deflation bait, all of these different things, you're talking about people measuring their house prices from a system that is printed $185 trillion in the last 20 years. And without asking, would my house be worth more without that printing? And so it's natural to measure the system from the system you live in, and that's what's happening.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back right after this with Jeff Booth, author of The Price of Tomorrow. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to return to our conversation with Jeff Booth. He's the author of The Price of Tomorrow. Very popular book, I must say. I see people tweeting about it all the time, and I've read it. It's a great read. Jeff, I wanted to pick up on something you said in the first bit there. Why would anybody think that letting their money be worth less every year be a good idea, right? It sounds logical. But we know that if you read the New York Times and Paul Krugman, who's their Nobel Prize-winning economics commenter, he'll tell you it is a good idea. You need to let inflation creep into the system. You need to have the fiat money in the system because that's how you generate GDP growth. You need people to be able to have access to all this credit because that's how you grow an economy. It's literally how they describe how an economy is built, by this manner. Right? So I guess that falls under the category of Keynesianism, right? How do we disabuse the New York Times readers of their fallacy, Jeff?
So remember, Krugman also said that the internet would make no more of a difference to economies than the fax machine, right? So when you trust an economist to tell you what technology will do, and then it's like trusting a horoscope for your future, and so that's why I want to be really careful about saying it's about Paul Krugman. He's doing the same thing that every other economist is, trapped in a system. By the way, he is right on one thing. He is right on the system. If they allow deflation, we'll have a cataclysmic collapse because the debt explodes in real terms and you can't pay it. And every single bank would fail, and every institution would fail on top of that. That's where they're stuck. They can't stop it. And they can't stop it because they've convinced the world that the only way we can live in a world, that productive society requires your money to be worth less each year. And that's allowed debt to explode. And now there's so much debt in the world, it's incongruent with where technology is taking us. So they're caught in one system trying to protect a whole bunch of former things that they've said, and it has to get worse as a byproduct. That's why it's a structural problem. But let's imagine they try to stop. Actually, that's actually why the argument shouldn't be about them or inflation or anything else, because they can't stop that system. They're going to keep going for sure. And the byproduct of keep going for sure destroys society, our climate, everything. And it destroys, it concentrates all power in the hands of few. That's the problem. So what we need is, and just like businesses, change never comes from the inside of a business. Kodak doesn't, even though they invent the digital camera, they don't exploit it. Netflix destroys Blockbuster. That's what's happening to the entire world economic order in a currency regime, and that's what's Bitcoin. Change comes from the outside and forces the change to a system. That's what Bitcoin is, but they can't stop it.
So first of all, it's not really about tech, it's about money. So yeah, it's software is money. It is tech money. But when you mention the word money, it's very, very intimate to everybody on planet Earth. This is their most personal thoughts are about money. And so it's very difficult to change people's mindset about something that they hold so dear in their minds. Now, we've seen what's happened in places like El Salvador. But you mentioned also a word there, deflation. And it's now you're using it in two contexts here. You're saying, oh, deflation is a disaster as it's currently playing out in the US, and they're trying to prevent it by a wall of money, which is failing. And that's one of the points of your book, is that no matter how much they print, they're not going to stop this trend of deflation. But we also, at the same time, referred to Bitcoin as deflationary money. So we're using that word in two contexts many times, not you specifically, but many people use those two words interchangeably in those two contexts. How would you unjumble that kind of misperception?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because people get confused about the cause and everything else. Technology frees our time, and technology is moving into every industry at blinding pace. Artificial intelligence, robotics will follow and just move throughout society. In that world, when you talk about deflation, a deflationary currency, all I think about is a currency that allows for deflation. In other words, allows the free market to work. Because by allowing the free market to work, you would see the abundance gained from technology, the time savings from technology, transfer to the broadest possible audience around the planet. That's what would happen. And anything that stops that concentrates wealth and power in hands of few faster. So that's what must happen to allow technology to because we're in a transition, and we don't see this because we haven't been in, our parents weren't in this transitionary time. We look at these books and history and we talk about inflationary policies and everything else, but we're in a digital transition that is more powerful than anything the world has ever seen. And it's going to get most of the deflation, that good deflation I'm talking about, is in front of us. And it requires an unmanipulated currency to be able to transition the abundance gained from that technology to the broadest possible audience.
You talk about that concentration of power, and certainly we see that in the United States, which is the center of this fiat world. It's all a US dollar fiat world. And I guess it kind of ties to that misinformation you talk about with the price signals. All price signals have been destroyed, right? The central bank thinks that it needs to control it in order to make sure that the people don't get too despondent and don't spend and don't the animal spirits and all that sort of stuff. And they don't like that the price signal, whether it was the bond vigilantes or the gold bugs, they destroyed those people, got rid of all of that. The fundamental lie seems to have been that in the US economy, we don't have wealth creation. We figured we could have an economy where China does it, or Vietnam, or Mexico, or somewhere else. That innovation, that wealth creation, all that happens somewhere else, and we could just print money. The printing of money was almost like a ritualistic thing, right? That like a cargo cult is like, okay, all we need is money and we'll be wealthy, rather than having any wealth creation. But in terms of this deflation of the, that technology delivers, isn't the black swan, the spanner in the works always throughout history, the collapse of an empire and the rise of a new one? We've seen the 18 Thucydides traps that have happened throughout history. 16 of them have been violent. But there usually is a period, a vacuum sort of period, and deglobalization and therefore increase in costs and stuff like that. Do you see that sort of thing happening, or does Bitcoin destroy all those models of history?
That's what I think happens, Stacy. I think the models are all going to get destroyed because of what we have. We never had Bitcoin before. So you had to go to war. So again, rational actors acting in their best interest. What would you do for a long time? Okay, but if you've given a vendor finance loan to the US to purchase your stuff, and they say they're going to devalue their currency, and they have to devalue their currency, would you be buying their bonds? No, you wouldn't. You would buy rare earth mines. You would buy assets around the world. You would do the things that are all signposts in what's happening today in the world. And those signposts create kind of a race to the key assets of the future, and war around protecting them. And then you get your populations to say, it's not money supply, it's those bad Chinese, or it's those bad. So that's pretty typical throughout history. Bitcoin provides a bridge away from that. And it's the most important foundation. I think it's actually humanity's most powerful invention, because it stops all this and provides a bridge. What's happening at the same time as all of this is happening is El Salvador is coming on, and people are moving there. I'm going to go there next year. If Canada changes things here, I might move there, but my business is there. And so you're seeing the free market race, and the free market and the innovation, the smartest people and the most innovation race to areas that actually create a more prosperous future. By the way, exactly like what led US to gain world influence in the beginning, before it all became corrupted, because that's what happened. That's Declaration of Independence, and everything else was around individual rights and freedoms and money that couldn't be corrupted. And so that's what created an innovative economy.
If you talk about jobs disappearing with technology, wages certainly under pressure. And we've talked about that in the fiat money world, which is a top-down, central bank, centralized system. Move to a Bitcoin standard, which is decentralized. I'm wondering what the impact would be on jobs and wages. And for example, I have this thing here. It's a plastic Bitcoin grenade. It's manufactured by a Bitcoiner. They use a 3D printer. This guy's backlogged with hundreds of orders, and he's got pricing power. He's selling this stuff at a profit. And he's not working for $9 an hour or $8 an hour. He's an entrepreneur. Does the decentralization of Bitcoin translate into a decentralization of, let's call it the atelier or workshop or small entrepreneurs, in a way where we see pricing power return to individuals on that scale?
For a time it does, and without fiat printing, it's better. But it likely doesn't all the way through. So we believe on decentralization, that we will all take decentralization. So if you think about what Google did, what Amazon did, so we go through these waves in history. And so if decentralization was perfect for everybody, we would use a whole bunch of different websites other than Google. But we rely on Google. It's because our minds want somebody else to do the work. Our minds, our brands, and everything else, we want somebody else to do the work, and we'll trust them. That's actually why decentralized money is such a critical aspect. because the trust in the base layer, the removing misinformation from that base layer, now we can trust all other economic calculations as a result, and the free market works.
All right, Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow is the book. It's literally on fire in some quarters. Thank you so much for being on Keiser Report.
Thanks, guys. It's a lot of fun.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. Special Summer Solutions with our guest, Jeff Booth, author of The Price of Tomorrow. Until next time, bye, y'all.